Hey there, this is Ari Whitten with the Energy Blueprint, and in this video, I'm going to show you why adrenal fatigue is not the cause of your fatigue. I know that's a bold claim, but I'm about to show you a ton of science that is going to blow your mind. Now, keep in mind, before we get into this, I am not saying if you've been diagnosed with adrenal fatigue, I'm not saying your fatigue or your symptoms are not real. I'm trying to say that your condition, your symptoms are not being caused by your adrenals, and the solution to fixing your symptoms is not all about fixing your adrenals. So before we get into it, I also want to mention, if you're interested in overcoming fatigue or increasing your energy levels, we've put together an amazing, epic, science-based guide to the top supplements for energy enhancement. You can go download that at theenergyblueprint.com/cheat sheet. Okay, so let's get into the video.
Secret number 4, holistic, natural, and functional medicine does not have much to offer those who have chronic fatigue or chronic lack of energy. Unfortunately, the natural health community, the holistic and natural medicine, which I generally associate with and I'm very much a part of, also, like conventional medicine, does not have very effective answers for those dealing with fatigue. Their thinking on this topic has been dominated for decades now by the adrenal fatigue theory, which centers around the role of the adrenal glands and cortisol as being the central players in fatigue. For those that are unfamiliar with it, let's do a quick overview of the theory of adrenal fatigue. It's generally explained like this. The adrenal glands produce stress hormones like cortisol to respond to periods of stress. Cortisol is a hormone that plays a role in a few different things, for example, blood sugar regulation, controlling the inflammatory response, and so on. And it's part of this stress response of our body. So, the adrenal fatigue theory basically says that in response to stress, this adrenal system gets taxed. Initially, we get a sort of alarm reaction and the adrenals produce more cortisol. Then they go into this resistance phase, or sometimes called phase 2 by adrenal fatigue proponents, where you may have high or normal cortisol, but the adrenals are getting taxed from some degree of chronic stress. And then eventually you get phase 3, which is adrenal burnout or exhaustion. And at that point, the adrenals just can't produce enough cortisol to keep up with demands. And then you get fatigue and you get some other symptoms and potentially chronic diseases. So this basic adrenal fatigue theory has dominated the thinking about why people have stress-related exhaustion or fatigue or chronic fatigue for decades now. Now, this, of course, seems like a somewhat logical concept, and perhaps that is why it has become such a popular idea. I mean, it kind of makes sense that, if the adrenals are part of this stress response and then they impact blood sugar regulation and a few other things, maybe they are the reason that we're getting so fatigued. There are also literally thousands of articles online and dozens of books written about adrenal fatigue, so of course it must be a real thing, right? Yet, if you're under that impression, it might interest you to know that adrenal fatigue is actually not even accepted as a legitimate medical condition by conventional medicine. This is a quote from the Endocrine Society, which represents 14,000 endocrinologists, MDs. Endocrinologists are conventional medical doctors that specialize in hormonal issues. And remember, cortisol is a hormone, okay? So this is within their domain. They said, officially as their public statement, adrenal fatigue is not a real medical condition. There are no scientific facts to support the theory that long-term mental, emotional, or physical stress drains the adrenal glands and causes many common symptoms. So there are basically two camps here. One is the adrenal fatigue proponents. These are people writing articles and books about adrenal fatigue and claiming to treat it. When asked, is adrenal fatigue real? They'll likely chuckle at the thought that anyone could not believe it's real because they believe they see it in their clinics all the time. They also believe that the conventional medical world just isn't yet as advanced as they are and hasn't yet figured out that the adrenals and cortisol are behind the epidemic of chronic fatigue. On the other hand, we have conventional MDs, and these are people that flat out reject the notion that adrenal fatigue is a legitimate medical condition. When asked if adrenal fatigue is real, they'll most likely chuckle at the idea that anyone could believe in it. Ask a conventional MD what they think of people who believe in adrenal fatigue, and they'll typically say that they're quacks. So each group of people believes the other group is wrong and simply doesn't understand what's really going on. So what's the truth here? Within the natural health community, which I'm very much a part of, the adrenal fatigue theory has dominated the thinking around fatigue for many decades now. Now, I myself was brought up with this concept in my education in holistic health. I read many books about adrenal fatigue, was taught about it from my mentors, and even taught the concept to my clients for probably close to a decade. I tested people's cortisol levels and treated them for what I thought was adrenal fatigue. So when I saw that conventional MDs were brushing off the whole concept of adrenal fatigue as nonsense, I had an idea to use the scientific evidence to prove that it was in fact real. I originally started with a simple idea: to compile the research in support of adrenal fatigue. I set out to write a book, was even going to call it The Evidence-Based Guide to Adrenal Fatigue, and it was designed to give an overview of all the research into the link between cortisol and fatigue, and I was going to prove that adrenal fatigue was real and that the evidence supported it. So I dug into the research and started reading the actual studies that analyzed if there's a link between cortisol levels or adrenal function and fatigue. What was originally a fairly simple undertaking ended up turning into over 6 months of work and analyzing hundreds of studies. What I found after all of that was stunning. I ended up doing the most comprehensive analysis of the science on the relationship between fatigue and cortisol that has ever been done. I say that definitively because I've looked extensively at all books on adrenal fatigue and all prominent articles written online, and I have not found a review of the scientific literature on this subject that is even 1/10 as comprehensive as this is. This review of the research examines over 25 years of studies from all over the world that have assessed the relationship between cortisol levels with various fatigue syndromes. Also, I want to mention one more important thing. I've gone the extra mile here and compiled all this research and displayed it publicly with all the links to the actual studies and quotes from the researchers and actual screenshots of the cortisol measurements from these studies, so that if any proponent of adrenal fatigue wants to go look at the research for themselves, they can go do that. What you'll find here is literally every study in existence on this topic for more than 2 decades. To give you a sense of it, let me just show you a quick scroll through this long 40-page list of studies, including the links to the studies and the actual screenshots. This took over 6 months of work to do, to find and analyze this huge amount of research. But let me sum it up for you here in just a few sentences. So what did I find in all that research? And this is a key question. Is low cortisol or poor adrenal function the cause of fatigue? Since 1995, there have been 59 studies on this topic done by researchers all over the world. Here's what they found. 11 of those 59 studies found slightly higher cortisol levels in people with these fatigue syndromes versus normal, healthy people without fatigue. 15 of 59 found slightly lower cortisol levels in people with these fatigue syndromes versus normal, healthy people. The majority of studies, 33 of 59 studies, found no difference whatsoever in adrenal function or cortisol levels between people with fatigue and normal, healthy people without any symptoms. In summary, what these studies make clear is that most people with burnout syndrome, stress-related exhaustion disorder, and various kinds of fatigue have perfectly normal cortisol levels that are indistinguishable from normal, healthy people who don't have symptoms or chronic stress. Contrary to the adrenal fatigue theory, the data definitively prove that the symptoms in these conditions are not actually caused by low cortisol levels, right? Because if you can have, and indeed if the majority of studies show that the majority of people with fatigue have these symptoms but have no cortisol or adrenal abnormality, then we know and we can say definitively that cortisol levels are not causing these symptoms. One more quick thing I want to mention here, because some people get confused on this point. When I say that adrenal fatigue is not the cause of your fatigue and your other symptoms, I am not saying that your symptoms are not real. Your symptoms are absolutely real. But the research does not support the idea that it's your adrenals that are causing your symptoms. And it's very misguided to think that you'll fix your symptoms by trying to fix your adrenal glands or cortisol levels. And if you've been trying to do that without much success, then this is good news, because now I'm going to show you the real path to fixing your energy issues. Again, if it's not broken adrenals that are the cause of fatigue, it doesn't make much sense to try to fix the fatigue by fixing the adrenals. Worse, that will take your eye off of real solutions, distract you, and cause you to waste a bunch of time and money without much results to show for it. To give you a quick overview of some of this research so you can see it for yourself, and again, I've compiled all this research in over a 40-page document on my site. You can see all of that for yourself, but let me give you the quick 2-minute summary of a few examples. So this is hypocortisolism, which is low cortisol levels, an evidence-based review. They said, quote, Although adrenal fatigue or burnout of the adrenal glands subsequent to chronic stress has been proposed as one mechanism by which low cortisol levels develop, current medical research does not support this claim. Here's a review of the evidence as of 2018. And the researchers here note, in these studies that have tested cortisol levels in people with fatigue, 2/3 of participants showed no difference whatsoever in salivary cortisol levels between healthy control subjects, normal healthy people without any fatigue, and those who were fatigued. Here's another one from 2015. They concluded, quote, diurnal salivary cortisol give a rather poor reflection of the prolonged stress exposure experienced by patients with stress-related exhaustion disorder. Such basal salivary cortisol measurements do not seem suitable as biomarkers for stress-related conditions such as exhaustion disorder or burnout. In other words, there's no real correlation between chronic stress and any sort of low cortisol levels. Another one, the neurobiology of burnout, looking at the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal gland axis. So that's the adrenals plus the hypothalamus and the pituitary. They said, quote, there is no HPA axis dysregulation in burnout. Another one, biomarkers in burnout, a systematic literature review, which is the highest level of scientific evidence. Speaking on all the studies, the researchers said, quote, when taken together among all the studies that investigated HPA axis function and burnout, 3 support an increase in HPA axis functions, which means slightly higher cortisol levels. 5 support a decrease in HPA axis functions, which means slightly lower cortisol levels. And 11, again, the vast majority of studies, show no relationship between fatigue syndromes or fatigue symptoms and abnormal cortisol levels. Perfectly normal cortisol levels in people with fatigue compared to normal, healthy people. Another one, clinical burnout is not reflected in the cortisol awakening response, the day curve, or response to a hormone suppression test, a way of assessing the function of the HPA axis. They said, quote, we concluded that HPA axis functioning in clinically diagnosed burnout participants seems to be normal. Here's the bottom line. This is a review of the scientific literature as of 2016. This is not my opinion. This is an actual review by researchers in this field. They did a comprehensive review of the science, and they titled it, after analyzing all the evidence, they titled it, Adrenal Fatigue Does Not Exist. You can guess what they said in the conclusion, but basically it is that the evidence does not support the theory of adrenal fatigue. Key points. The science does not support the theory that fatigue syndromes have any connection whatsoever to abnormal adrenal function or low cortisol levels. Given these simple and inarguable facts, it makes absolutely no sense to continue to try to explain fatigue and exhaustion and burnout through the lens of the adrenals and cortisol levels as though they are the primary cause. The primary cause of these symptoms is clearly not abnormal cortisol levels. So we must stop trying to fix these symptoms as though the adrenals and cortisol levels are the primary cause. Quick note, again, this is the quick 3-minute summary version of 6 months of work. For those of you interested in exploring all of this in much, much greater detail, I've posted a 50-page article / short book and over 3 hours of video content examining all of the nuances and details of the science on this subject. I've posted all of that publicly and it's all freely available. So for those of you interested in the details, feel free to dig into that. Bottom line, fatigue is not caused by your adrenals or cortisol levels.
Hey there, thanks so much for watching this video. If you found it helpful and you're there thinking, man, I'd really like some help to get this area of my life sorted out, to overcome fatigue and to massively increase my physical energy levels, well, I want to help you do that. So if you go to theenergyblueprint.com/cheat sheet, I have a free ebook that I would love to give you. Now, this is not a cheapy ebook. This is something I could easily sell for $50, $100. This is packed with gold. It is packed with the information, critically important and powerful information on the top 30 supplements, science-backed supplements to boost your physical energy levels. Now, I'm talking about non-stimulant supplements. This is not an ebook filled with, caffeine and nicotine and other stimulants, stuff that gives you a temporary boost, but actually makes your energy worse in the long run. This is all about the best, most powerful science-backed supplements that are non-stimulants that are proven to actually build your body's capacity to produce energy at the cellular level, to build real energy, a real high energy body. So again, go to theenergyblueprint.com/cheat sheet, all one word, cheat sheet. And on that page, you can download this ebook for free. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you found it helpful, please share it and make sure to go to that page and download that ebook so you can get started increasing your energy levels today.